Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church. We ask that you would join us in song as we sing together. We seek first. Peace that passes my understanding, love that calms my fear and regret, joy unending, eternal pleasure in your presence, my risen King. I will seek, and I will
depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities.
We ask the God of justice to come and to move. Let's sing this. When you move, darkness runs for cover. When you move, no one's turned away. 'Cause where you are, fear turns into praise. And where you are, no heart's left unchanged. So come and move. So come, move, let justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. When you move, the outcast finds a family. When you move,
as we come into this time of prayer together, I invite you to hold one family very close to your heart this morning. We received news yesterday that our beloved church member, Dan Kohler, died in a motorcycle accident near his home in Guatemala. Dan spent many, many years in this church. Even when he moved to Guatemala, he'd often email us on a Sunday morning and say, hey, I participated online. I was there. Count me as present. And Dan is and was very much present in our lives and in our community, even from that distance. He would often visit with our church members when they would travel down to Guatemala. He'd come up here. And we have the prayers of our sister church in Gethsemane as we grieve today. Please keep his mother Connie in your prayers. She is a deacon here at First Pres, a resident of Telhai, and our hearts are breaking for her this morning. Would you pray with me? Merciful God, in love you created us. In love you sustain us. From our first breath until our days on this earth are done. In confidence we bring our prayers to you, knowing that you hear us and respond to us. God, in this time of distance, we pray for those estranged from family, friends, and neighbors due to illness or to broken relationships. We pray for those who are struggling to find connection in a world that seeks to divide us, and peace in places of pain. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray for those struggling under the weights of fear or regret, for something they did or for something they neglected to do. We pray for all that is unfinished and unresolved, that we might be caught up in your care, and that we might learn to live as forgiven people in the midst of all that is broken in our lives and in the world. We pray for those who find themselves far from you, who struggle with doubt, with disillusionment. We pray for forgiveness for the way the church has so often betrayed you and betrayed your children, for the courage to move forward in humility and in hope. We pray To that end, if you would, take a moment and send her a picture of your children through just by email, and she will be doing something with it for the school year to come. To that end, this is now the time where we'll take an offering. If you are able to give something to support the ministry of this church, God's work in the world, we hope that you'll consider doing that over our website. Before we move forward in the service, will you pray with me? God, we praise you for all that you give us, from the breath that fills our lungs to all of those people who show us your presence in this world. May the gifts that we bring be a sign of our faith and our trust in you. Use them for your glory to feed the hungry, to bring good news to the suffering, and to spread your good news to all who long to hear it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Matthew 15:10 through 28. Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, "Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles." Then the disciples approached and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said?" He answered, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone, they are blind guides of the blind, and if one blind person guides another, both will fall into a pit." But Peter said to him, "Explain this parable to us." Then he said, "Are you still also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds the heart, and that is what defiles. For out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile." Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. Matthew 15:10 through 28.
Good morning. Well, I don't know how I caught a cold by staying home most of the time and wearing a mask every time I go out, but catch a cold I did, and I am well on my way to better. But if I need to clear my throat or take a couple extra sips of water this morning, I pray that you will bear with me. Let us pray together. Sustaining God, by the power of your Holy Spirit, open our minds and our hearts to your word of love, mercy, healing, and blessing. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. My first semester of college was rough. I was only an hour from home, and I was at the school that I wanted to be at, but nevertheless, that season of change in my life was deeply unsettling for me. And my family knew this, so they got into the habit of sending me cards and postcards with words of love and encouragement. And the message of one of those cards struck me as so true that I still have it to this day. The card shows a rope hanging over a patch of thorns and a little girl hanging on to the bottom of the rope. And the caption reads, "When you reach the end of your rope, tie a knot in it and hang on." I think that image and those words have stayed with me for all of these years because sometimes life gives you no choice but to grin and bear it. And I think that most of us have been dangling from the bottom of our ropes for quite a while now. Some of us might be more comfortable than others. Maybe you have a swing on the bottom of your rope that you can sit and rest on while you're dangling over the thorns. For others, your arms are getting tired, your palms might be sweaty and blistered, and maybe even the rope itself is starting to fray, dropping you ever closer to the thorns. This time that we are living through has tried all of us in so many ways, and it seems that there is no end in sight. And the pain that we are feeling, be it physical, emotional, psychological, or spiritual, is real. However, I hope that when each of you looks to the future, you don't just see darkness and you don't just feel despair. Because as people of faith, we are also people of hope. In Romans chapter 5, Paul writes that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. We are people of hope who can look at the world and say, no, this is not the way that God intended it to be, and God is not done working with us yet. We know that the story is still being written, and God is working with us and through us to bring God's kingdom to life here on earth. Where did this vision of the future come from? And how can we be so certain of it in a time when absolutely nothing feels certain anymore? Well, I hope the answer is kind of obvious. It's Jesus. In the passage that we are looking at today, we pick up right in the middle of the gospel-long story of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is well underway, the crowds and the disciples following him along, witnessing the healings and the miracles, and trying to make sense of all of the teachings. I wonder sometimes if in the thick of it, his disciples could appreciate the history that they were living through. If they could see somehow that Jesus was turning what they thought they knew upside down in order to build back up something different. And can you see that that is still what's happening right now, today? Jesus is still working through all of us who are working to understand who Jesus is and what he means for our world. And for us today, I think it can be summed up in just 2 words. Think bigger. At the beginning of this chapter, the Pharisees and the scribes came to Jesus. They were so bothered that they left Jerusalem to go to where Jesus was. And they said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Now, washing hands before eating was a religious tradition for the Jews that was treated as having equal authority as the law. So this was a big deal to them. And Jesus' response essentially was, "You think that washing hands before eating is important? That has absolutely nothing to do with whether you are clean or unclean before God." He trivializes and dismisses their concerns and walks away. Now imagine if Jesus showed up to us today and said, "Don't say the Lord's Prayer anymore or any of those creeds. They're not getting you anywhere with me." Well, this was that kind of moment for the Pharisees and the disciples. But now imagine if you were told that you can't gather together to worship in person anymore, or that if you do, it can only be in a very small gathering and you can't sing at all. Well, we don't have to imagine that, do we? We are painfully aware of how that feels. And you would say, what? No. These are the things that we do that help us stay close to God. They are important. They are biblical. This is the way people have always worshiped God. And as he walked away, you would scramble after and you'd say, no, Jesus, wait, you've got to give us more. Help us understand. So Jesus does, because Jesus is thinking bigger, and he wants to bring us along with him. So here's his explanation in verse 18. What comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles. What's important here, Jesus says, isn't what literally goes in and out of your body. It's not about food, it's about words. Words, Jesus wants us to understand, come from the heart. Now, we might not use the words clean and unclean to describe the state of our heart these days, but I think if we frame it a little differently, we'll understand exactly what Jesus was talking about. So let's start with this question. How is your heart feeling these days? You might not describe it as unclean, but you might say that you feel anxious or unsettled or stressed. And when that is what's inside us, it is inevitably what comes out of us. A couple months back, I shared on Facebook a conversation that my 9-year-old son and I had, which just seemed to perfectly encapsulate how we were feeling in the moment. And quite frankly, it still does. So my son said to me, "I love you, Mommy." To which I responded, "I love you too, sweetheart, even when I am tired and cranky and grouchy." To which he responded, "Which is often these days." We were both speaking our truths. None of us want to be cranky and snippy with our children or with our partners or with the other people who fill our lives with joy and meaning. But I suspect that most of us have, in one way or another, because it's hard to hold negativity and frustration and exhaustion inside of ourselves. And that is what so many of us have been carrying. Jesus is teaching the disciples that the state of our heart matters. It affects our ability to be in relationship with other people and to be in relationship with God. It makes sense, but it leaves me wondering, what about when we can't help it? The state of our country and our world today is incredibly worrying. It's important that we pay attention and natural that we would feel concerned. And what about people who experience anxiety or depression? Or people who are responsible for the long-term care of a loved one living with illness or disability? What about people living with grief? Sometimes our worlds are gray, and sometimes they are dark gray. And that's okay. The question is, what does God expect of us in those times? What do we do with those times when what comes out of our mouth just isn't great and we feel like there's nothing we can do about it? When our worlds are shaky and uncertain and our hearts are unsettled, where does that leave us with God? And how do we possibly find the capacity in those times to think bigger? Several years ago, memoirist Anne Lamott published a short book titled Help, Thanks, Wow, in which she suggests that these are the only 3 prayers that we will ever need. Did you catch them? Help, thanks, and wow. In the first chapter, she describes the stories of many different people of all variety of religious backgrounds, and these people all found themselves in a place where life where all they could say was, help. And this is what she wrote. Praying help means that we ask that something give us the courage to stop in our tracks, right where we are, and turn our fixation away from the knot of our problems. We stop the toxic peering and instead turn our eyes to something else, to our feet on the sidewalk, to the middle distance, to the hills from whence our help comes, someplace else, anything else. Maybe this is a shift of only 8 degrees, but it can be a miracle. It may be one of those miracles where your heart sinks because you think it means you have lost, but in surrender, you have won. Let me say that again. In surrender, you have won. Friends, Jesus cares about the state of our heart. He knows that we can't will it into obedience to God and peaceful harmony in a world that is anything but. But we can try to see past our present difficulties to future promise. We can choose what we put into our lives. I'm talking about relationships, social media, the news, books, music, activities. We can choose to be intentional, to choose things that point us in the direction of grace and hope. We can choose to ask God for help. And maybe, hopefully, from this posture of humility, we can begin to think bigger. Now let's return to Jesus and the disciples, because one of the things that I love about Jesus is that he doesn't just teach, he shows. So after talking with the Pharisees, Jesus and the disciples left that place and journeyed to the land of Tyre and Sidon. This was the land of the Canaanites, who were the ancestral enemies of the Jews all the way back to the time of Moses. And not long after they get there, a Canaanite woman comes up to them and starts shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." You see, even in enemy territory, Jesus' reputation preceded him. Even though Jesus had never been there before, she knew that she was coming to a representative of the divine, pleading the desperate prayer of a parent who is despairing over the well-being of her child. When this mother says, "Have mercy on me," that word mercy translates into help. Like Anne Lamott, bottom of your rope, God, please help. But she came to Jesus with more than desperation. She also came with faith. By calling Jesus the Son of David, she acknowledges Jesus as the Messiah of the Israelite people. She knows where he and she stands within their time's socio-political landscape, and it's not together. But for us, the phrase Son of David can serve as a kind of hyperlink that jumps our minds back to the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, which begins an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the Son of David. This Canaanite woman knows that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah and that she is not seen as part of his people. But do you know who else is mentioned in that genealogy? 3 women: Ruth, Tamar, and Rahab. And all of them were Canaanites, just like this woman. So the history of where Jesus came from is also in some ways the history of where this woman came from. And I think that Jesus understands that she is challenging him right off the bat to see her as connected to him, even though their world didn't see it that way. She was thinking bigger. The other part that is striking about her opening line is the word Lord. Did you know that our one English word for Lord comes from multiple words in Greek and Hebrew? And as is often the case, things are lost in translation. Here, the word this Canaanite woman uses is kurios, which means master, to whom a person or thing belongs, about which he has the power of deciding. Although the implication of master might have negative connotations for us in our place in history, the Canaanite woman was using it intentionally to put herself in a position of belonging to Jesus. She is indirectly asking him to accept his lordship of her, his position as her master. Can you see how she has come out swinging? She comes to him thinking bigger, hoping he will come through. Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon. And then we are off to the races in a back and forth that has caused scholars and faithful people no end of heartache for centuries, because the response of not just the disciples, but also of Jesus is awful. The disciples dismiss her out of hand, asking Jesus to get rid of her because she's bothering them. And Jesus' response is that he's there to help the people of Israel and no one else. So the woman repeats her plea, "Lord, help me." And once again, we hear the cry of a breaking heart that has nowhere else to turn and won't give up. And then Jesus kind of pours salt on the wound by saying, "It's not fair to take the children's food and give it to the dogs." Well, scholars have lots of opinions on the implication of that word dog, but the bottom line is it's an insult. But once again, the woman persists. And she effectively says, yes, maybe the Jews are more important to you than I am, but even a crumb of your power is enough to heal my daughter, and I'll take it. The persistence of this woman is what originally drew me to this passage. Women don't get to speak much in Bible stories, but in this one, her voice is prominent and strong. She insists that Jesus doesn't need to look at this situation through a lens of frugality, because she already knows that Jesus operates from a place of abundance. She knows that God is bigger. God is bigger than the scandal of a woman talking to a man, and God is bigger than the centuries of bad blood between Jews and Canaanites. No matter what divisions and limitations we may have here on earth, God is bigger. And what is Jesus' response? "Woman, great is your faith," with an exclamation point. If, with her first words, she asks Jesus if he will accept his lordship over her, then he answers her question here. Yes to your faith. Yes, in your belief in me as your Lord, and in your belief of your importance to me and God. The world may have drawn lines between us, but we see you, and we love you, and we belong to each other. And oh, by the way, your daughter is healed. Go and see the power of my work for yourself. It's like I said earlier, Jesus practices what he preaches. If in the first part of this passage, he says, let go of what you think you know and focus on your heart and how what's in your heart prompts you to be and move in this world, then in verse 21, he says to the disciples, let me show you. The words of Jesus turning the woman away are the words of this world, not of an expansively almighty and loving God. We are uncomfortable with those words because we hear how they sound, exclusionary and unmerciful and unloving. That's not what we want to hear from God. That's not what we think God says to us. But it is how we act too often. We draw all kinds of lines between ourselves and other people based on where we live, our religious practices, how we vote, our skin color, our language. Jesus says, let it go. Loosen your grip on what you think you know about yourselves and others and the way that it drives you apart. Open your heart. I am bigger. Let me change you and show you another way. I wonder what limits you have in your life, or what limits your understanding of God. You might not even see them as limits. Sometimes we don't see things that way until they are broken down and God starts building something new back up. What might it look like to look at the world through the lens of God's bigger? It has been a great privilege for me to lead 2 of the book studies that our church offered this summer for people who wanted to learn more about racism and its effects on ourselves and on our country. And both of the books offer a profoundly different definition of racism than what many of us held going into those studies. Many of us think about that word as being applied to an individual, but the authors assert that the word racism or racist is actually best applied to systems, to broader structures of power in our society that work for the benefit of one racial group more than another. And if this definition is new to you, I know it can be a lot to wrap your heads around, so let me give you one brief historical example. Some of you may remember or have learned about poll taxes, which were a tax that an individual had to pay before registering to vote. Several states put poll taxes into effect in the late 19th century as part of the rise of Jim Crow. They were designed to keep African Americans from voting, and they worked. Poll taxes were an example of a racist system that privileged one racial group over another. The books that we are reading here this summer speak much more directly to the racist systems at work in our country today. It's incredibly eye-opening. And what so many of you in those groups have said is, I didn't know. I didn't know the systems that I was part of. I didn't know that I was being neutral and that by doing so, I was upholding systems that were and are hurting people. I didn't know. And what I'm then hearing people in these groups say is, but I'm ready to learn. I am ready to begin acknowledging that I have been part of the problem so that I can begin learning how to be part of the solutions. It's really hard. Throughout our discussions, people have voiced feelings of horror, of sadness, of guilt, of despair. And it takes courage to face those really difficult emotions and not walk away. But by staying put, by persisting, our eyes are opening to see the world not just from our perspective, not just the way we were taught, but to see bigger. Racism is bigger and more present than most of us realized. But now that we are seeing bigger, we are hoping to become better allies and to find a healing way forward, to help change what is causing harm and work to build a more just existence for Black, Indigenous people of color. And even though it is and will continue to be really hard, we can lean maybe harder than ever before on our faith. That's what the many people who have been doing this work for centuries have done. Because God is both with us and ahead of us, just waiting for us to become more aware and to help bring bigger to life in the world. We are moving into an election season. We are wrestling with the effects of an awakening consciousness to systemic racism. And COVID, we still have COVID. And those are just some of the challenges that we are facing on a collective macro level. Each of you know full well what your individual struggles are. They are hard, they are real, and it is maddening that we can't be together to share each other's burdens right now. But I have one more story, a story of God doing something beautiful, of opening my eyes to bigger in the midst of this time of not being together. The Pharisees had strict ideas of what it looked like to follow God. We saw that in the beginning of today's passage. And although we might not like the comparison, the same could sometimes be said of us. Before the pandemic, our denomination held very strongly to the directive that communion must be done as a gathered body, together in person. And then we had to let that go. And the pastors of each church were allowed to say that wherever you are, with whatever version of the elements that you have, that is the body and blood of Christ, the presence of the risen Lord with you, connecting you to the body of believers by the Holy Spirit. And I don't know what that has looked like for you, but for me, it meant giving my son a piece of crumbly, fresh from the oven scone and a small cup of orange juice, and watching him lick his finger and go back to the plate again and again and again to scoop up every last crumb and to wash it down with every last drop of juice. And all I could do was watch him and pray, "Dear God, let him always be this hungry for you." That couldn't have happened before. As we live through these times, knowing that we want God's bigger, but frequently having no idea how to get there, I encourage you to remember these words spoken recently by a pastor in Washington, D.C., who is trying to help his church think bigger. He said, "Hope is a discipline. Hope is a practice. It's important to fight for hope. When your world feels like it's closing in, think bigger. Or if you can't think, just pray for bigger. And if you do find moments of strength, ask yourself how, in the midst of breaking down, God is calling you to bigger. And may the God who is big enough to create, sustain, and redeem all of creation hold you and fill you and inspire you today and always. Amen.
I invite you to sing with us. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my
Caroline said earlier, my title is not pastor, it's the director of Christian education. So you'll have to forgive me if I take advantage of this opportunity to give you some homework. That's right, you heard me, it's August, and I am giving you homework. A few minutes ago, I asked you, what limits your understanding of God? And I asked you to consider how you might be seeing God's bigger, and those are genuine questions. I really want to hear your answers. So your homework is to take a few minutes, think about your response, and then send them to me. You can send me a note here at the church through the mail, you can email me or call me. Let me know what you have seen or felt falling away, and what God is rebuilding bigger in its place. And together, we can bear witness to the work of God in our world. And remember, people of God, as you go forth into your week, the words of the woman, Lord, help me, and the words of Jesus in response, great is your faith. Keep fighting for hope and go with confidence that God is intimately with you and loving you today and always. Amen.